Sunday night edition of the Crash the Pond podcast. Guys, October came and went. That happened so fast. Jake, I don't know how you feel about it, but it is November 1st. The time has moved back. So we got an extra hour today to do this show, to break down some topics that our awesome listeners have submitted to us. So there's a lot to get into here, but are you ready for the last 2 months of 2020? We're almost done.
Yeah, and just what we all needed, more time in 2020. Just more time. Just gave us an extra hour, That's what we all wanted, right?
Well, hopefully, and I'm hoping this is true for everyone, but 2020 has been largely fine for me. I feel really lucky. Haven't had employment be affected. Haven't had too much, outside of working from home, things of that nature. So if you have been affected negatively, we're pulling for you and hoping that these last 60 or so days will be smooth for you, and hopefully better things ahead in 2021.
Yep, hopefully, definitely on that front. And if you have been affected by this, our thoughts go out to you, and hopefully this little podcast can help you get through your day, help you find a little fun, have a little thoughts about the Ducks. Hopefully, hockey coming back soon. Hopefully, so.
Right. So the big thing in October was we had the NHL draft and we had we had free agent frenzy, and both those things have passed. The Ducks have kind of made their moves, making some interesting choices, obviously, in the first round, and taking some home run swings in the later rounds. And in free agency, we found out very clearly that the Ducks are looking to be a win now team. They signed Kevin Shattenkirk, and they brought back Derek Grant, and all of a sudden the rebuild / retool, whatever you would like to call it, is over effectively. The Ducks have made their moves, and they're looking to get back into the playoffs, which I will just say, and I think we already talked about this maybe last week, the more I've thought about it, the more it doesn't make a lot of sense because of the way you look at how this team has performed over the last 3 years. I just don't really understand what Bob Murray has seen in this roster that he thinks it can make this big jump next season. Now, that being said, there is a possibility that can happen. I'm not ruling it out, but that's what we've got to talk about here today, in a way.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it actually a lot on the Patreon episode. For anyone that's a patron out there and wants to go hear our in-depth thoughts about kind of the roster, a lot of different things like that, go check out that episode. I think that was a really, really good one that we went through. So go check that out. I think that was the Patreon episode, right? We've done a couple podcasts this past week.
We went very in depth on that episode. We spent a lot of time talking about the state of the franchise and the Ducks. So yeah, if you're not currently a patron, I would definitely recommend checking that out. And we'll get into more of how you can do that later on in the show. But we did get a few questions, a few topics to talk about. But one thing that was submitted to us, Jake, do you have who specifically submitted to us for the list of forwards?
Yes. So that was sent to us by C.Jordan in the Discord chat for our Patreon. So he sent us, it was a screenshot. I'm not quite sure where the picture actually came from, but it was linking to Lyle Richardson. Spectors Hockey .net is the website that had it. Basically, it's Lyle Richardson speculating on top of what Eric Stevens recently said in a mailbag. Eric Stevens in a recent mailbag basically was asked who he saw as a potential trade target for the Ducks, and due to the fact that the Ducks had interest in Kasperi Kapanen, and I guess supposedly they also have real interest in Tyler Johnson. He was purely speculating that maybe the other option that they could go and look at is some short-term free agents or guys that would be signed to shorter-term contracts. And the possibilities he listed are Mikael Granlund, Erik Haula, Anthony Duclair, Andreas Athanasiou. So I think that group of four is a very interesting group of four that all kind of represent different types of talent that will be on different types of contracts. And I think going through each of them real quick to kind of understand what each of those players are is a very good decision. And I think that's what we're about to do. And so, so you want to kick it off?
So one thing I do want to preface in all of this is just overall philosophically, do you think that the Ducks should be looking to add players of this ilk, or should they still be looking to add to their roster, given that their team is pretty much set in a way?
Yeah. I think the fact that the third or the fourth line is probably going to be the players that are there I think my gut reaction is, well, no, they probably shouldn't look to add, because in reality, they have enough players on this roster. I mean, you and I built out our ideal Ducks roster. I can't remember if that was the Patreon or the last main podcast, but we were able to do that without utilizing the fourth line as it's currently constructed, or as it probably is going to be constructed for the Ducks. With that being said, that shows you the depth of talent that the Ducks have. So I think the short answer is no, I would not. The longer answer, though, where I'm a bit conflicted on this, is that, yeah,
there's always a longer answer.
There is. You know, we do a podcast for a reason, Felix.
No, I'm not being snarky. It's just funny.
Is that I don't think it's a bad idea to sign one of these guys to a 1-year deal. The main reason I say that is if the Ducks are bad, which there is a possibility the Ducks are bad, they are able to then flip one of these guys. And they could, if this player, let's say, for instance, I don't know, Anthony Duclair, they sign him to a 1-year deal. He ends up having a great season. The Ducks are still bad. They're able to flip him for picks, prospects, whatever they want at the deadline. And he's able to go to a team that is a contender. He's now proven kind of what he did last year wasn't a fluke. And he can benefit from it. The Ducks can benefit from it. So I think from that context, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And also, I mean, the Ducks are lacking high-end talent. So if you can get a guy, I think Mikael Granlund is maybe the only player in this group that I would consider to be a potential high-end talent type of player. Having said that, getting Mikael Granlund on a 1-year deal is not very likely when Evolving Hockey has him projected to be signing a 7-year deal in free agency. So who knows where the market ends up?
That seems a little unlikely, though,
True,
at this point. Would you agree?
Maybe, I mean, and maybe that's a reason why he signs a 1-year deal, is he views this year's free agency market as being crap, and he wants to give himself 1 year to prove it and come back to free agency next summer when potentially there's more money to be thrown around and get a much bigger contract next summer. So maybe that's the exact type of player the Ducks will be looking at. But I mean, the question is Granlund going to want to come to the Ducks, or is he going to want to go to a cup contender? Maybe the Ducks are a better fit for him because he's going to get first line minutes and can maybe shine with that happening. So I think there is a realm of possibility where it's not a bad idea, especially as a free agent, where you're not giving up any future assets or any draft capital, anything like that, to get these guys. But there is the conversation that has to be had of the Ducks are in a cap bind, and that's important to note in this situation of there's not just a bunch of cap space to play with where you can give a guy a 1-year deal and not worry about it this year. The Ducks are tight against the cap, and so they don't really have a whole lot of money to throw around. And if they are to sign one of these guys, it either has to be a really cheap deal, keeping in mind they still have to sign a backup goalie, or they need to move money out. And so that is the consequence of signing one of these guys.
Well, a lot of people might ask you, but what about long-term injured reserve when the season starts? So what would you say to that?
My response to that is it's an option. It's definitely an option. And I mean, let's just pull up the Ducks cap sheet, because I think that's an important thing to have in front of me while I'm doing this. But so the Ducks are currently at projected cap hit of 82.42999 cap hit with a cap ceiling. The cap ceiling is what, 81.5, right?
Right.
Is that correct? 81.5.
Yes, that is correct.
And so the Ducks are currently over the cap by about $1 million. And they're going to be able to use long-term injury reserve to be able to essentially get full relief from Ryan Getzlaf's deal of 6.875. So they're going to be able to go over by about another $5 million. The issue with that is it's not this get out of jail free card like a lot of people like to think it is. There's a whole lot more complexity to it. It depends on when you put the contract on LTIR. The Ducks could do it right now and just get that space. There are some negatives to that. They could wait to do it to the start of the year, but then they have to become cap compliant with that deal and basically send some guys down to make it work, and then put it on and they can call some guys up. But the issue with that is you now no longer can accrue cap space. And I think that is the biggest negative to using LTIR. And when I say that is, this is really getting into the nitty gritty of it, but we're in the off season, so it's the perfect time to do it.
Do it.
The way that you have to understand cap space is that it accrues over time. So every team throughout the start of the year starts with $81.5 million in cap space. And every single day that goes by, part of that is eaten up by the player's cap hit, because cap hit is on a per day basis. And so that's why you'll see guys get sent down and called back up a day apart, because the teams are really trying to pinch their pennies, send a guy down for a day. We saw this with Shea Theodore years ago with the Ducks. And in that way, they can accrue. Basically, they're not going to have the daily cap accrual for that guy for that day. And that can add up in the long run. And at the trade deadline, you may end up with a fair amount of cap space that you've accrued by doing that gives you some flexibility where otherwise you wouldn't by doing that. The issue with using long-term injured reserve is that even though, yes, you are technically under this elevated cap, you are not actually accruing any space unless you are under $81.5 million. If you are under the $81.5 million, then you are accruing cap space. And so basically you are losing all of that flexibility at the end of the season. And the other issue of it is a lot of the rookies, a lot of these guys, they have bonuses built into their contracts. And even some of the older guys, like, I know Corey Perry had a bunch of bonuses in his contract. The bonuses don't come into play with the cap hit. The bonuses come into play after the season. If the team has accrued enough cap space where the bonuses will fit under the salary cap for that year, then you're great. If it then goes over, then you have an overage that will go towards the next season. And so the issue here is if you're using LTIR, that means you're over the cap. That means you have no accrued cap space at the end of the year. If, let's say, Trevor Zegras plays in the Ducks, let's say, for instance, he wins Rookie of the Year, there's a massive bonus associated with that. The Ducks will then have to carry a cap hit next year for that. It will not be left to this season. And so, while yes, there is LTIR, as you can understand from what I'm saying now, is it's not simple. There's a whole lot of negatives to it that if you can avoid it, that is the route you want to go. And so you don't want to go out and sign a guy under the assumption, well, we have LTIR, we're going to be able to use this, let's go into that, all this different stuff. The only teams that really can go ahead of that or use that methodology is a team like the Maple Leafs. These teams that really can make use of penny pinching in a lot of different ways that a small market team like the Ducks can't.
Right. Well, I think that's a really good point, and something that's really important to explain that I feel like we've done in the past, but especially with the Ducks now being against the cap, which they haven't been in, I don't know, maybe over a year. It's been a little while. We're up against the cap. I think it's important to note that a lot of people do seem to think that this is just like you said, a get-out-of-jail-free card, and it's very clearly not. So
no, it's
good job there to explain it.
Yes. And by the way, if anyone has questions on that, I'm in no way an expert on it, but that is my understanding from doing a lot of different research into it. The LTIR is not specifically laid out in the CBA. It's something that I've listened to a couple different podcasts that have had guys that I believe, what was it? General Fanager? That was the website that predated Cap Friendly.
Yes.
The guy that ran
R.I.P.
that. The guy that ran that website was on the Steve Dangle podcast a long time ago, before he was hired by Vegas to be their cap guy, actually. And I remember him talking about that LTIR and kind of how that works and with the overages, and that was something that really stuck with me about it, and the fact that it's not this get out of jail free card. So, but if you have any questions, feel free to DM me about it. I can definitely provide some insight there.
Well, also, just look at it this way. If you're someone that, is trying to understand what this is all about for LTIR, just go to Cap Friendly's LTIR FAQ page, and you will see very quickly that it is not a simple thing. There's an equation that you have to go through just to figure out how much relief you can actually get. So, yeah, the Cap Friendly FAQ page is really awesome. I think anyone who's a kind of a diehard fan and who wants to understand more of how the cap works, you can learn a lot by going through that FAQ. So let's get into that list of forwards, though, shall we? So this is obviously not a reported list. This is just names that would potentially make sense for the Ducks to pursue. Now, as Jake has already laid out, the Ducks already have these guys in theory. They have guys that they are hoping to see take a next step, kind of, wild cards in a way. A Sonny Milano comes to mind, a Danton Heinen comes to mind, and then even some of the younger players like Max Comtois, Troy Terry, Max Jones. All of these guys are in some form or fashion relative unknowns. We need to see them take that next step. And so a lot of the guys that we're about to talk about, they're not necessarily unknowns, but they are a bit of wild cards. And the Ducks already have those kind of players. And so I don't know if it completely makes sense for the Ducks to dip into that again, but given the fact that you never know who's going to take a step forward, who's going to take a step back, who's going to stagnate, it doesn't hurt to have as many kicks at the can as possible. I don't think that that's a bad thing by any means. So if they bring in an Erik Haula or an Anthony Duclair or whoever, at the very least, you're giving yourself an additional possibility that you could have someone who breaks out in your lineup.
Yeah.
And if it's on a cheap deal, like you mentioned earlier, that you can get out of, well, then even better.
Yeah, and I think if you can then trade them for extra pieces, if the team is bad, that's great. That's exactly what you want to do. And I remember, I think it was the Maple Leafs a couple years back when they knew they were probably going to be bad. Now, granted, that goes against really the thought process of Bob Murray saying the team's in win now mode. But if you're able to flip a guy to get pieces, you're able to help him resurrect his career, get into a better spot, different things like that. It's a win-win situation. And the Ducks and Bob Murray can play it off right now as being, well, this is a guy that helps us right now, makes us better right now. And if they really do want to, they can use it to help them in the long run also.
Right. But keep in mind, though, the Ducks don't have cap space right now.
Yep.
They are over the cap. So
that is the issue with all of this and why. To me, if the Ducks are looking to sign any of these guys, someone has to get moved out. It's really that simple to me.
Mm-hmm. So let's just go through the list. Let's start with Mikael Granlund. So he is a free agent. He's 28, and he's going to be 29 in February of the coming season. Was a 9th overall pick in 2010. So how do you feel about this name landing on the list? You know, he was just on a 3-year, $5.75 million deal, as you listed, or as you laid out earlier. He's projected to get a bigger deal, although I think that's probably out the window by now if he hasn't signed yet. So what do you make of Mikael Granlund?
With Mikael Granlund, honestly, it's a little shocking, I think, to see his name on the same type of list in the concept of a guy that will be signed to a short, cheap deal. Because, I mean, this is a guy that was a first-line center for the Minnesota Wild for years. And it's not as if he's that old. I mean, let me just double-check how his age. But I believe
28.
he's 20. Yeah, he's 28. So he's in his prime right now. These are his prime projection years. Yes, he had a little bit of a down year with Nashville last year. But this is not a bad player. And so, I mean, if you can get Granlund on a cheap deal, or not even cheap deal, but a couple million for a year, $3 to $5 million in that range for a year, a prove-it deal for him after his bad year in Nashville. And now, granted, his bad year in Nashville wasn't even that bad. Per Evolving Hockey's goals above replacement, he was 3.1 GAR for the Predators last year. But this is a guy that, with the Wild, was fantastic. And he's a guy that, let me just double-check, but I believe that he drove play pretty well and towards the other team's net. Yeah, has had in Nashville last year 51% expected goals for percentage. In Minnesota 2 years ago, 57.5% expected goals for percentage. So he's a guy that's pretty good, and so I really don't have a bad thing to say about him. I think he would be a great signing for the team. I think the only issue is he kind of fits into that age bracket of guys that are starting to be at the end of their prime age and prime production years. So do you really want more of those guys on your team? If you are trying to make the playoffs now, the answer to that is yes. If you're trying to make this team better for the long run, you 1-year deal, sure. But if this becomes a multi-year deal, big money contract, then it could be an issue.
So the thing with Mikael Granlund that is interesting is that, for example, last year he was kind of more of a defensive specialist for the Predators. He wasn't really dominating play offensively. He was still driving expected goals, and that's what you want. But the way he was getting there was really by when he was on the ice, the opposition was being shut down. Now he's a good shooter, and if you look more at the last 3 years of his career, you see that he's more than what he showed last year offensively. And even still, I mean, he had 30 points in 63 games, and with 17 goals. Those are still fine, respectable numbers. And then the year before in Minnesota, when you combine his tenure in Minnesota and Nashville, he had 54 points, right? And that was in 79 games. So he's a fine producer, and I think that he does drive play well at 5-on-5. Now he might not necessarily be a guy that's going to really improve the Ducks power play. If you look at how he performed last year in Nashville, what's interesting is that he fell off from being a really good power play player in the previous years in Minnesota, especially, to being kind of more of a lower half of the league power play producer. And I think that part of that, of course, these stats that we're looking at try to isolate for individual performance, but the Nashville power play is notoriously bad, and they notoriously really try to use their defensemen to drive that. And why wouldn't you when you have Roman Josi? But Granlund, if you look at more of the tracking data, is an excellent passer, and I don't think you can have enough of those guys in your lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're sound defensively, then he's a guy who, in theory, would make the Ducks roster better. Now, I don't necessarily know where you slot him in because, like we talked about in the beginning of all this, the Ducks kind of already have their lineup set, and they already have enough names. But he is a guy who, I mean, right now is definitely better than a Sam Steele. And so and he might even be better than Ryan Getzlaf right now. And so if your goal is to make this team better for the now, well then, yeah, Mikael Granlund probably makes sense. I have no idea in hell how you afford him, but he makes sense.
Let me ask you this. If you somehow shipped out Adam Henrique and then signed and got whatever you got back, you didn't get a center back to fill that role, and then you went and signed Mikael Granlund to take that spot, do you think that, regardless of looking at the whatever the Ducks got back for Henrique, but assuming they got something of value back, if they got something of value back plus Mikael Granlund, is that better than Adam Henrique? Adam Henrique was valuable to the Ducks last year.
Yeah.
Let's be clear with that. And as much as we keep saying maybe they should trade him, that's not ignoring the fact that he was probably one of the Ducks' best forwards last season.
Well, you could argue that Adam Henrique was better than Mikael Granlund last season. So, I mean, there's a definite case to be made there. He was a better producer. But some of the underlying numbers were better. The age, sure, he is 2 years older, but again, the idea is to win now, right?
Yep.
If we're isolating our analysis to that, I think shipping out Adam Henrique probably doesn't make sense anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean,
unless you're getting something back of great value.
I mean, I may say that I think a swap of Adam Henrique for Mikael Granlund, I think maybe the production may not be there, and maybe that's where you would argue, well, then you should just keep Henrique. I think Granlund makes the Ducks a better team, though, than Adam Henrique does overall in terms of 5-on-5 play. I think if you compare the two, I'm looking at the RIPM charts right now, and while last year, and this is kind of where the big concern would come in, last year was not great, and you could say last year Adam Henrique was the better player. But I think if you look at the trend,
and Adam Henrique did that on a terrible team.
Yes, if you look at the trend over multiple years, though, Mikael Granlund is the better player at 5-on-5, and so you're banking by making that move. You're banking on Mikael Granlund becoming what he was in Minnesota, and that's a risk. It's 100% a risk. And so if you're the Ducks, maybe you don't take that. Maybe you kind of stick with what you have. But
also, but there is a possibility that Granlund could break back out because he's still in that window of prime production. And so
if you got,
it's just kind of a tough bet to make, is all I would say.
Yep. But if you got something of importance back for Adam Henrique, and then you also have Mikael Granlund, I think that's a better situation for the Ducks.
Okay.
Especially if Granlund's on a cheap deal, or not cheap, but short deal. If it's a 1 or 2 year deal at $5 million.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with what you're saying. Personally, I think that if you're trying to be really good next season, you probably want to keep Adam Henrique.
Yep,
but
I agree.
You could definitely make the point that he may take a step back next season, whereas Mikael Granlund is probably either going to hold at where he is or maybe burst back out a little bit. So he's a guy that I would be curious to see on the Ducks, but I just don't know how they're going to make it happen because of what he could command salary wise.
Yep, exactly.
So and he's not even a guy who's projected to make a ton of money. I mean, in a normal environment, he's projected for like we talked about, $6.5 million as his cap hit, and that's not enormous, right? I mean, it's it's kind of second line center money. So
Yep.
it will be interesting. But he's got to be interesting. Okay, what about Erik Haula? Let's talk about that. Another name on this list. So Erik Haula is actually older than Mikael Granlund, which in my mind, I don't know why, but I assumed it was flipped.
I think Erik Haula just
Erik,
broke out a lot later, and it feels like Granlund's been around forever, and Haula has not. And so Haula, in my head, almost feels like this younger player from that aspect. But, I mean, pure age-wise, you're right. He is older than Mikael Granlund.
he's 29. He's 29. He's going to be 30 in March, and he has one excellent season to his name, and that was the first season in the Vegas Golden Knights history where he had 29 goals in 76 games. Regressed pretty intensely the season after. I mean, he was injured, right? He only had 2 goals in 15 games, and then last year for the Carolina Hurricanes, who took a bet on him, he had 12 goals in 41 games and then didn't score after being traded to the Florida Panthers. So Evolving Hockey has him projected at, let's see here, at 4 years times 4.2 million in terms of his cap hit. And I don't see a situation where he commands that kind of salary. This is the kind of guy who gets squeezed out, I think, in this marketplace. But let's dive into the player a little bit. So if you look at Erik Haula, I mean, he's a guy who, at least looking a lot at last season, wasn't very good. I mean, he's good at driving offense, right? He's above average offensively at 5-on-5, but that is almost it. He's a good shooter. He can get his own shot. He can produce goals, but he is not a guy who's going to really do much of anything else for you. He's below average defensively. Doesn't make your power play better. Doesn't make your penalty kill better. So, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the issue here is that, I mean, he doesn't really do anything a whole lot different than what the Ducks already have in their bottom 6. He kind of fits in with kind of Derek Grant and that kind of thought process there of not that great in his own zone, can put up a couple goals here or there if his shooting percentage is high, but has the ability to do that. And I don't really know necessarily where he fits. I mean, he's a guy that I believe played center a little bit here and there, but also can play on the left side. And so I just don't know where the fit would be there with this Ducks roster. We kind of know the fourth line is kind of set, or we think the fourth line is set. Who knows if that's actually how it's going to play out. But you would think that the Ducks would want to get Max Jones or Max Comtois playing time on that third line, one of those two. And if Erik Haula came in and played that side, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. With Granlund, you can see a bit of a fit there because he has the history of the high-end play. He was a first-line center in Minnesota. The Ducks are a team that lacks having that high-end skill. And while Granlund had issues last year, there is that high-end skill still there, though. And if he can somehow tap back into it, the Ducks could benefit from it. Haula, I just don't really necessarily see the benefit in signing him. I don't know what he would do for this Ducks team that's different than what they already have.
Well, the thing with Haula also is that his game really fluctuates year to year. There are years where he's an offensive type guy where he's driving play the other way, and then there are years where he's a defensive specialist and who can contribute on special teams. And the iteration that we've seen in recent history is more so of a guy who's going to get you some offense but isn't really going to do much of anything else. And sure, if you can get him on a very cheap deal, right, so that he can recoup some of his value and then go seek out that contract, maybe if he breaks out on the fourth or third line, I mean, of course, I think the Ducks are better off with an Erik Haula than a Nick Delorier or a Carter Rowney, right? I think we can agree on that. That if they got him on third to fourth line money, although he is essentially a second liner, but I just don't know if you're going to be able to get him on that type of money, given the Ducks cap constraints and the way that the current market is. So he's a guy who, at the right price, I would be curious about, but assuming that he can get anywhere close to what he's projected, he's a guy I wouldn't be looking to make room for him, essentially.
Yep.
Which probably doesn't make sense, because it's not as if the Ducks are bereft of these these skilled guys up and down the lineup where they can just,
Well,
they already have all these skilled guys.
that's kind of my point, though. I don't necessarily. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't view Haula as being that. I view Granlund as being that, where maybe you make that you kind of make space for him because of that. I don't know if I see Erik Haula being in that same vein. Maybe I'm a little bit off with that assessment and that determination, but I view him as a bottom six guy. And the Ducks have plenty of that. The Ducks have plenty of that within the system. The Ducks have plenty of that on the roster currently. And so it's not as if this is a guy that really fills a hole that the Ducks have been missing for a while, especially if he's able to find his game. So, I don't know.
Yeah, he's a guy I'm not too interested in. Just for the sake of transparency, though, I used the word bereft incorrectly. I meant flush with talent.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, okay. Do you want to talk about Anthony Duclair? Because he's a guy whose name it seems like we've heard about over and over.
It's
in terms
definitely
of a potential fit for the Ducks.
It's definitely been thrown out there because I think. I mean, let me get your take on this. Do you think Anthony Duclair hasn't signed yet because no one wants him, or do you think he hasn't signed yet because he's asking for too much?
I would say that the latter is causing the former.
Okay.
So I think that he had a very, let's just talk about Anthony Duclair here for a quick second, but he's 25. He just recently turned 25, so he's still young.
Yep.
And he just had a career year where in Ottawa playing, I don't know how much of this you can really attribute to him, given that it was such a bad team and he was kind of there given the opportunity, but nevertheless, he had 23 goals in 66 games, 40 points, and it was a breakout year for Anthony Duclair, who has shown some promise in the past. You'll recall in his first full season in NHL with the Coyotes, he had 20 goals, but that was back in 15-16. Evolving Hockey has him projected at, a bridge deal, essentially, 2 times 3.5, but that was before he was renounced by the Senators, and so I don't know what he would fetch on the open market now, but I would assume that he's probably looking to eat into some of his UFA years or get a rich bridge deal. What do you think? What do you think his asking price is right now?
I would think he's probably asking for 5. I think he's probably asking for a bridge deal, maybe 2 years. Evolving Hockey's predicting him at 3.35. I would bet. Kind of as a guy who just scored 23 goals, he's probably going to be asking for in the 5 range. That's probably what he's asking. That's probably the holdup there, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, so one thing that I guess I should clarify with Anthony Duclair. So just to get this right, he was not qualified by the Senators.
Yes, I believe that is the case. He was not. He was not given a qualifying offer.
So we don't really have to consider then the bridge deal because he's just a free agent. He's a UFA.
Correct, but
right.
I get well, the bridge deal would be him
trying to recoup, trying to get back into the market sooner.
Correct.
When things kind of settle down.
Correct, exactly. That I think bridge deals this year make a whole lot of sense for a whole lot of players because the aspect of the market just not being good, and so there's a whole lot there that maybe they want to do. I do find it interesting though that the Senators did not. That they didn't qualify him because his last contract, the qualifying offer wouldn't have to have been huge, but they probably didn't want to take him to arbitration he didn't, they kind of knew if he would have gone to arbitration, he probably would have won. And so, they probably would have had to have paid a pretty fair amount due to that. So getting back to the whole point, Anthony Duclair is a good player. He's a guy that would provide the Ducks some high-end talent. I'm looking at RAPM charts right now, and the main issue with him is in the past 3 seasons, basically when he's on the ice, the team is not great in terms of defense. The puck goes there's a whole lot of high quality.
He's awful defensively.
Yes. There's a whole lot of high quality chances going the other way, a whole lot of shots going the other way. Basically what everyone thought of Daniel Sprong defensively is what Anthony Duclair actually is defensively. I think right. That's a fair statement to make. But
yeah, if you look, go ahead.
Here's the big but of all of it. He drives offense in a way that while it doesn't fully offset his defensive or his issues in his own zone, his lack of defense, he drives offense in a way and creates his own shots and gets his own goals in a way that the Ducks don't really have. And the fact of the matter is,
Right.
he's 25 years old, and while we do have a history of his defensive game being suspect, and it's been suspect in a lot of different locations with a lot of different coaches, he is still young enough where that could potentially become better, or you can insulate him with specific type of players that can benefit him in that situation. I
Right.
would think putting him on a line with maybe a Jakob Silfverberg could help, and different things like that. So because he is a left wing, so you can play him on the left side, Jakob Silfverberg on the other side, and that helps out significantly with that aspect of the game. And so he's a guy that could be a very interesting person for the Ducks to target due to that.
No, and I do agree with that. And I think that the thing with, would you agree that of the three players we've discussed so far, he has the highest upside?
Yes, and I think that's partially due to age, partially due to talent.
Exactly, because what we see with Anthony Duclair, as you've already laid out, is that he is awful defensively. I mean, there's kind of no other way to put it. Looking at last season, he was in the 4th percentile in terms of even strength defense by goals above replacement. So he's not good. 4th percentile is very, very low. But he is above average offensively. And what we've seen with him is he has an ability to outperform his shot rates, that he's a very good finisher, a skilled shooter. And I mean, let me ask you this. How wide of a gap is there? And I may get hate from this, but I don't care. How wide is there of a gap between Anthony Duclair and Patrik Laine? Because to me, Anthony Duclair is the poor man's Patrik Laine. A guy who sucks defensively.
There's a big gap.
Well, yeah, obviously in age, but just right now what they are. I think that
there's a big gap there. It's mainly due to the fact of, I think Laine has, I think Duclair honestly may be a better play driver than Laine is. And maybe this is giving Laine too much credit, but Laine has a history of scoring goals and has an ability to outproduce his expected goals for total because of having high-end skill. And I don't necessarily see Anthony Duclair having that same high-end skill, but he does drive shots and drive chances in a way that the Ducks don't really have. Now up on the screen, for those of you watching the Twitch stream or those of you watching the YouTube YouTube recording of this podcast, you'll see I have up on the screen the single season RAPM charts with Rickard Rakell and Anthony Duclair for last season. And you can see, well, yes, you can easily see the negative in expected goals against per 60 and Corsi against per 60. You can also see that in terms of play driving, in terms of shot quality, Anthony Duclair was better than Rickard Rakell in that aspect, and I've made no bones about this, that Rickard Rakell was a really good forward for the Ducks last year. Even if the production wasn't there, the chances were there, a whole lot of signs were there for him having a good season, and Anthony Duclair was better than Rickard Rakell, and I think that's all you really need to know, and you put him on the left side. I mean, that's a hole for the Ducks, and that's one that he would fill significantly for this team. And like I said, he's 25, so he kind of fits in the younger. He's kind of in between the core of Hampus Lindholm, Cam Fowler, Jakob Silfverberg, Adam Henrique. He's kind of in between that group and then the Troy Terry, Sam Steele group, and I think that I'd be more comfortable signing a guy that's 25 than a guy that's 30 with this group.
Yeah, and I think that there's even an argument. I mean, I'm like stuck on this Laine thing, but last season I think Duclair was in some ways a lot better than Patrik Laine.
Now you're making me pull up the RAPM chart for Laine versus Duclair, and that's now on the screen. And
okay.
I mean, it plays out like we talked about, that Laine in terms of shot generation, in terms of chance generation, not great. Actual goal scoring, very good. And that's kind of the book on Laine, is that he doesn't really do a whole lot outside of score goals. But
well,
go ahead.
I think in a way Duclair is a version of that. Is all I'm really trying to say.
Fair.
And I'm just stuck on the don't trade for Laine train, I guess. But yeah, so to circle it back to the Ducks, I think Duclair is, what I like about Duclair is, in a way, he's kind of this blank canvas where you see the strengths, but if you can get him into an environment where hopefully it's a more sound defensive environment than Ottawa was, although we don't know if the Ducks are necessarily that much further along, then maybe he can keep up in that respect, and his talents that he already has that the Ducks are so devoid of, that maybe he can really bring that element that they're missing of a true sniper, of a goal scorer. And of course, I don't see him as becoming a 40 type goal scorer, but I do think that he's just going to give you that shooting talent that every roster needs. Just a guy who can bring it down the wing, or a guy who can make a cutback move in the offensive zone and just snipe one. And he's potentially that kind of guy for them.
Yeah. Real quick, Heyo Deflo asked, do these metrics account for line mate quality in terms of RIPM? My understanding is Evolving Hockey's RIPM charts. I think they try to. I think they try to isolate player performance.
The whole point is that they try to remove the noise from that.
Correct.
So it is factored in, but the idea is to distill it down to the most purest representation of their individual performances.
So yes, so that's kind of what I'm saying, is they do account for line mates though by taking that out. So you can compare these two without having to use the conversation of
exactly.
Well, this guy played on this team, this guy played on this team. So they do account for how the quality of your line mates, and you can do a straight comparison of these players with these tools on Evolving Hockey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's an interesting conversation, and it's definitely the one that. And I will say this, just because here I go again with the spreadsheets. But if you look at Jay Fresh Hockey, who's a really good follow on Twitter, has a tool called the WAR Roster Builder. So essentially, you can build your own roster using Evolving Hockey's wins above replacement. And so far, of the guys that we've discussed, the only guy who increases the Ducks' projected standing points is Anthony Duclair. So I've plugged in Granlund and Haula. And at times they've actually decreased the projected standings points, but Duclair increases them. So I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but it's something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Let's. Did you have anything else on Duclair? Anything else you wanted to touch on?
Nope.
Okay. Let's talk about someone who he's been quite the interesting career arc, Andreas Athanasiou. So at times, it's felt like in Detroit that the Red Wings have wanted nothing to do with him, despite his analytics darling type profile, right, where he's just crushed it in the minutes that he has gotten, and yet he's never really gotten the true top end opportunities. And he's 26. He just turned 26, and with the Oilers last season, an environment where you might have thought that he would have really thrived. He only had 1 goal in 9 games. Now it's a small sample. But if you go back to 18-19 with the Red Wings, where he did get that opportunity, he had 30 goals in 76 games, and he had 54 points. So it's funny how each of these players has that one standout season, right, to some degree. And with Andreas Athanasiou, there's no debate on that. If we go to his projected contract, again, this is within the RFA realm, which doesn't really apply here anymore, but it would have been 2 times 3.5, so almost exactly what the Duclair deal would have been. So what's your thought on Andreas Athanasiou? What do you think that he could bring to this roster? Does he make sense?
I mean, Athanasiou, what he brings is straight line speed. That's his game. I mean, for anyone out there,
he's very fast.
He's very, very fast. That's basically what he's known for. The main issue with Athanasiou is, I'm looking at his RAPM charts right now, is he doesn't really do a whole lot in terms of anything. It seems like the goals basically came, and let me confirm actually what his shooting percentage was during those seasons, but it almost feels like it was just a high shooting percentage season for him, and they're not exactly repeatable. Yeah, he was shooting 13.9%, so not a huge amount when he scored 30 goals, but still a pretty significant amount, especially when you look at the fact over the last couple of years, he's more so been in the 8% range, which feels more so right for him. So I'm just not sure really what he would bring to the table. Now, granted, he's also 25, so he could improve his game. Maybe there can be steps taken. And if you look at the underlying numbers on him, they're not great, but he was on a bad Detroit team for most of those seasons, and that kind of plays a part into this. And it's not as if the Oilers either are that great of a team at 5-on-5. So
no,
I'd say he's less likely to make the Ducks better in comparison to Anthony Duclair, but if you can get him once again on a cheap deal, 1 year, 2 year deal, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, especially with the idea that he's still young enough where if it doesn't work out, you could probably trade him for something of value. And I think that's the key aspect here, is that no matter what, you'll probably be able to move either Athanasiou or Duclair. Athanasiou, honestly, is probably more movable than Duclair is for a couple of different reasons. Duclair would be his 5th or 6th team at this point in time, and I feel like there are less teams that would be likely to take a chance on him. Whereas Athanasiou, if he signed with the Ducks, that would be his 3rd team, and the Oilers, it was only 9 games. So I feel like there would be more teams out there likely to give Athanasiou a shot if it doesn't necessarily work out. So I think that it's not a bad move, but I don't think it really helps the Ducks out in any way at all, basically.
Well, what's interesting with Athanasiou is that his most recent season with the Oilers and with partially with the Red Wings, he really fell off a cliff. His offensive game really took a nosedive. He was still good at driving offense, and he was still a good shooter, but he just didn't ignite offensive play like he has in the past. But if you expand your sample a little bit to the last 3 years, he still looks very good in terms of on the power play, even strength offense. He's a good shooter. He's a good playmaker. He's just, I mean, the reason why he's kind of in the position he's in is because he's just so pitiful defensively. I mean, that's always been the rap on him. But he is a guy who I think right now is a little bit undervalued because of the most recent season that he's had and just kind of the rap that's been on him.
Yep.
Thanks to the Detroit years. So he is a player who I think you could get on a cheaper deal, and if you do hit, if he does show that last season was more of an anomaly, I mean, he could really inject some offensive juice into the Anaheim lineup, and that is interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think right now him and Duclair are kind of equal in my eyes, although Duclair is coming off the better season. But I think Athanasiou, if you look at the trend with Athanasiou, I think that last season seems more like an outlier, and given his age, he's probably due for a bounce back. He's still within his prime.
I'm just not really seeing a whole lot. And now, granted, it's kind of this. I think we're looking at a couple different things here, and what I'm looking at is not really showing a whole lot. But he can definitely bounce back and do more than what I'm saying. And I think that's kind of the key thing to add to what you're saying is that I don't disagree with you. That's not exactly what I'm seeing, but I do agree with the fact that he can bounce back, and he is young enough to be able to do that. I think Duclair provides a shot generation that an offense generation that Athanasiou does not. I think that's the key difference there.
Yeah. Well, so if you look at evolving hockey's goals above replacement in terms of the last 3 years, so for even strength offense, he was in the 65th percentile, which is not elite, but it's pretty good. And defensively, 12th percentile, which for anyone out there, not good. Power play, 75th. Penalty kill, 22nd. Goals per 60, 96th. And then in terms of primary assists per 60, 58th. So you get the picture there of a player who's not elite in terms of driving play, but he is capable of getting his own offense at a high rate.
Yeah, and that's the key thing there is that I'm more so looking at play driving. You're looking at more so production. I think that's the little bit of difference there. And I think that if he can regain that goal scoring form that he had, if he can find that scoring touch that he had, that would be a huge get for the Ducks. I'm not exactly confident in that. I'm not as comfortable in saying that will happen due to the fact of him having a high shooting percentage in the season they did well, whereas I think it's more likely he's going to be in a little bit of a middle ground. But even if he is in a middle ground, puts up 15 to 20 goals, that's a big plus for the Ducks.
Well, the thing with Athanasiou is that his baseline, even in a down year, was still an above-average shooter if you just look at league-wide.
True.
And so his range for bouncing back could be very interesting. And so I would probably still have Duclair over him.
Yep.
They're both flawed players in their own ways. And so I think that you definitely have an argument in terms of, Duclair over him. And with Athanasiou, there's ways to look at it as him being a positive as well. Now, the last name on our list, so Tyler Johnson. Now, how did this name get to us? Just to refresh my memory.
This name got to us. Both Lyle Richardson and Erik Stevens had mentioned that the Ducks are interested.
So this is more of a reported thing. This is
not speculation. This is from various different sources. The Ducks are interested in Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson is currently under contract, though, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, but the Lightning have made no bones about it. They are looking to get rid of him. They are looking to move him. They have put him on waivers and are looking for a team to take that contract off of their hands. They did not want anything in return, just put him on waivers, and no one claimed him. He is currently 30 years old, and he has 4 years left on his deal at $5 million a year. And so the Ducks basically are interest, but there would need to be money retained in order to make it work. So if the Tampa was able to retain, and at max they can retain 50% of the salary, if they were able to retain, get it down to $2.5-3 million for the next 4 years, maybe the Ducks would look at doing that. So I don't really know how confident you are in Tyler Johnson's ability to continue the play that he's had into his late 30s. I'm not necessarily sold on it, though.
Yeah, he's a guy I would stay away from, even though there are qualities to his game. It's really so, and just to list those qualities, he's an okay play driver. He's a good shooter. He has become accustomed to playing against decent competition, but he is not really that good defensively anymore. He doesn't give you a whole lot on the power play. And even though he has some skill to his game, which you would think logically the Ducks need more of, it just, even on a really good Tampa Bay team, it doesn't translate to excellent results, or even to okay results. And if you consider the price tag that it would take to acquire him, I just don't see any way in hell that it makes sense for the Ducks.
Yeah.
Agree or disagree?
I completely and totally agree with you on that. It just it doesn't make any sense. And I think you look at age. I mean, to be honest, I would not be shocked if the Ducks did this deal. I would not
be. Well, so just to clarify, what is the mechanism for the Ducks acquiring him? Do the Tampa Bay Lightning have to retain some salary to make this work?
That's basically what will need to happen, because, like I said, he was put on waivers. Anyone could have claimed him and not have had to give up anything for him. No one wanted him at his full cap hit. So yeah. So I mean, here's the thing: Tyler Johnson at $2.5-3 million, sure, decent player.
Yeah.
But for 4 years, that is very steep. Taking him, like, that is the exact type of deal that the Ducks shouldn't be giving out right now. They shouldn't be giving a 30-year-old 4 years.
Right.
And that's kind of the issue with it. And
having said that, they just signed Kevin Shattenkirk.
Well, and having said that, I could very much see the Ducks doing this, because it's bringing in a guy that just won a cup. It's
cup pedigree.
It is the thought process of he makes the team better right now, which, give or take, he probably does. Maybe. I'm not even quite sure on that. You can let me know what J Fresh Hockey's war generator has in terms of the impact of bringing in Tyler Johnson. But I'm skeptical of it even making the Ducks better right now. But I think you can definitely play it off to the fan base as you're making a move to bring in a guy that just won a cup, that was a pretty decent contributor on the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's not as if he was just a fourth liner. He was a guy that had been on the Tampa Bay Lightning for years, had been a pretty good player on Tampa for a couple of years. He's past his prime. He's 30. He put up 31 points this last year, but had 47 points the season before, 50 points the year before. He had, his best season, he put up 72 points. Like, he's had a pretty good career so far, but he's not he's going to probably settle into the 30-point range. It is probably 30 to 40 points is where he'll end up, which is what the Ducks have plenty of, honestly, right now. They have a lot of guys that probably will end up in that 30 to 40 point range. And it's not as if, and to me, if you're looking at having a guy that's going to be in 30 to 40 point range, trust your kids. Play Sam Steele, play Max Jones, play Max Comtois.
What are the Ducks bringing him in? What role are they bringing him in to fill? Like, where is he going to play in the lineup? Because right now, if you plug in, so again, this is just me plugging him into a sheet, right? I don't want to make this sound like this is the end all be all, but the Ducks' projected standings points actually goes down with Tyler Johnson, right? So it either goes down or stagnates depending on how you organize your lines. But the point being, they already have 4 centers right now, right? With Derek Grant, Ryan Getzlaf, Sam Steele, and Adam Henrique. So what do you do with Tyler Johnson?
Yeah.
Where do you put him? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense because they already have a bunch of centers. They've already committed themselves to this core. this is going to be an unpopular take, but are you prepared for it?
Sure.
You're going to disagree with it. I think it would make sense for the Ducks to trade Ryan Getzlaf this upcoming trade deadline.
So let me be perfectly clear. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think it's a bad decision for making the team better to move Ryan Getzlaf.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I disagree with is I think that there are some outside factors in that play a part.
Yes.
And I think that Ryan Getzlaf being a career Duck is very important. And to me, I think that outweighs what you could get at the deadline. And I think that is the key difference there.
My issue with Ryan Getzlaf is that he's still, I think, thought of among this front office and in the fan base in league wide as a guy who can play top 6 minutes and can still be this kind of, excellent contributor. But he really hasn't been that the last 3 seasons. I mean, he's been bad defensively, and I don't know how much of that is just not, being fully caring about that aspect of the game, given the way the team is rebuilding. He's still very good offensively. He's still a good playmaker. He's, a lot of the things that we know Ryan Getzlaf for, he still does them very well. But I don't know if he's a guy who you can really put in a top 6 role anymore, unless you're really insulating him. And even then, I just don't know.
Yeah, and Apparition chimes in our Twitch chat saying Getzlaf has a full NMC, so most likely that does not happen.
I understand, but at the same time, if you listen to some of his comments about, the possibility of being moved, I think he's the kind of, I mean, again, this is completely me speculating at this point, but I'm just saying he does seem like the kind of guy who, if the team approaches him about that and he's getting the message that they're looking to go a different way, he might just take that as, okay, I'm going to go give it a shot somewhere else. I think that his primary option, what he would prefer, is to stay in Anaheim and finish it out there. But I don't know. And again, this is really me reading deeply into what he said, but it doesn't sound like he's completely ruling out that possibility. So,
yeah.
and that is a clear hurdle for any of this to happen. But with Ryan Getzlaf, he still has a lot of name brand value. He's still a guy who can bring something to the table. But I think if you look at the Ducks' arc right now of where they're trying to be, especially if they're out of the playoff race by then, they need to really upgrade down the middle, because Adam Henrique is really their only bona fide NHL center right now. Because Ryan Getzlaf, yeah, he does do some things really well, but he's not really a two-way guy anymore. And Sam Steele is still finding his game. Derek Grant is terrible at 5-on-5. So they have a bunch of centers, but they don't really have any elite ones, close to elite ones, and that is an issue. You can't win in the NHL. You can't win now without guys who are in the upper echelon down the middle.
Yep. So I think it's about time to have a little bit of a word from our sponsor. So this podcast is brought to you by Manscaped.com. Autumn's in the air, and Manscaped is here to ensure you don't carve your pumpkins when you're grooming. And I hope everyone had a good time carving their pumpkins recently. And by pumpkins, though, now we actually mean your boys downstairs. In fact, Manscaped is on a mission to change the way you approach caring for your balls. And great news, and this is actually nope, not fully relevant. They just released their products in the UK, Canada, and Australia. So, Felix, what's your opinion on the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0?
I have absolutely loved it. I've had issues in the past with different mowers, different devices to trim up. Sometimes, they can make you, they irritate, right? They don't really work that well. But with the way that Manscaped has designed this product, I don't have that. With the LED light, I can be even more precise than I have been in the past. And believe me, that comes in handy, especially when you're dealing with delicate regions. So I highly, highly recommend it.
Yeah, I definitely highly recommend it. Also, I actually went ahead, used mine yesterday, cleaned up my chest hair. I'm a little bit of a hairy man.
Wow.
Cleaned up a lot of different places, and it was great. And also, their crop mop ball wipes. You never know when an opportunity strikes, so you should always be prepared. Plus, you don't want to stink when you sit around after that Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving is coming up. We're all going to eat a lot. You're going to be sitting there. You want to make sure you smell nice afterwards. And also, all the different stuff that they have, all the different cleansers from the crop mop, the crop cleanser, the hair and body wash, the ball deodorizer, all of it. The formulations are all vegan, cruelty-free, dye-free, sulfate-free, and paraben-free. So you know your manhood is in good hands. So you get 20% off and free shipping if you go to manscaped.com and use the code CTP. So you get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com with the code CTP. Make your balls a priority this fall. So thank you so much to Manscaped for sponsoring this show.
Yeah, and remember that's the code CTP. So very, very important. Very important.
Yes.
You're going to help us out if you use that.
So where do we want to go next with this, Felix? We got a couple different things that we can hit on. We have one little fun segment that will take a little bit of time.
I think that why don't we roll that out?
So
the fun segment.
Yes. So we've been mentioning a little bit now that we keep mentioning Defend the Nest whenever we talk about the San Diego Gulls. Good buddy John Broadbent runs that website, and he keeps throwing it out on Twitter, kind of answering some of the stuff that we mentioned. So John and I were actually texting in the past week or so that why don't we just do a little bit of a Defend the Nest segment? So it's a little bit tough with him being in New Zealand, getting him in for any little segment or anything like that. So the easiest way for us to do this was basically send him a question. He recorded an answer. We're going to go ahead and play it. Hopefully it plays through. People in the Twitch chat, please let me know if it is not playing. And we'll also insert it into the MP3 so you can listen to it. So here is the very first time that we're doing Ask the Nest, is I believe what we're going to be calling this segment.
Ooh.
And it was a question that we got for actually our Patreon episode that we figured we'd throw at John of what do you think the chances are that the Gulls will make the playoffs next year? And John gave us a really well thought out kind of answer going over all of the different teams that he views in the Gulls division. So here we go. Let's take a listen to that right about now.
Hey guys, thanks for this awesome and hard question. And by the way, I hope you're all doing well and wearing your masks and keeping safe. It's a bit scary seeing what's going on there. It's like Felix said, yeah, we've done pretty well with it. It's kind of like the zombie apocalypse. Who would have thought, being on an island? But yeah. So back to the question: will the Gulls make the playoffs, and could they win the cup? It's a hard one. It's all dependent on how this season goes, in terms of if or when it happens. The current rumors are that the Canadian teams will move their farm teams north of the border, so that would mean Bakersfield and Stockton would not be in the same division. It could be a bit different, in which case the Gulls might have to play Iowa and Texas in addition to the other teams. I don't know. That's all I know. But anyway, let's just assume that the Pacific stays as it is. I have my top team as the Reign, LA's farm team. They are just stacked. Rasmus Kupari, Kyle Gunstrom, Jarrett Anderson-Dolan, though he might graduate. Gabe Verratti, Alex Turcotte is making his debut. Tyler Madden making his debut. Sam Fagemo, Akil Thomas making his debut. Aiden Dudas. Mike Yesamon was pretty good last year. Bjorn Foot, we all know about. Sean Dursey, Kyle Clegg. And they made some good signings. They got Mark Alt from the Eagles, who's good veteran depth and would provide leadership on their blue line. And Troy Grosnick, who was playing for the Barracuda at one point, I think, and he used to give the Gulls a lot of trouble. So yeah, the Reign are without a doubt going to be the division winners. And second, I would put, if they stayed in this division for this season, the Condors, which is Edmonton's farm team. They've got some pretty good. They've got all the same names as last season, essentially. They've got Joe Gabrandella, Kirill Maximov, who I wrote about in an article as a trade target, Raphael Lavoie making his debut, Cooper Marody, Cameron Hebig, Tyler Benson, Alan Quine, even Kayla Yamamoto might spend some time there, though he'll probably be with the Oilers, and Philip Broberg might come across, Ethan Bouchard, and Oliver Rodriguez making his debut this year as well. So yeah, the Oilers talent is coming through. It's coming through this year. And then third, it's possibly a homer pick, but I'm putting the Gulls. They could be third or fourth, but I'm putting them third for here. And yeah, I've been listening to your podcast, and I know you're saying Zegras and Comtois will probably be with the Ducks, but if they're not, I'm putting them on the Gulls' first line with Bryce Kindop, and then second line Jack Kopeka, Lundestrom, Podorowski, third line Antoine Moran, Sam Carrick, Vinny Lettieri, who they signed from the Rangers and was their leading scorer for their farm team last year. Some good goal scoring that they need. And then they've got Benoit Gru coming through the season, so Benoit Olivier Gru, I've put him on the fourth line with Chase DeLeo and the other signing they made, Max Gollard. And that's not counting guys they haven't signed, like Chris Mueller and Alex Dostie and Corey Tropp. And Blake Peterl is in there as well, but he's not signed. And then on defense, we've got Mahura, Goalie, Walensky's come back, Benoit and Drew, with possibly Hakanpää. And that's not counting Axel Anderson, who comes in this year, but I'd need to see more of him before I could see how much of an impact he could make. They've also not got Scott Meldenhauer back under contract yet. And it all really depends in goal. So as you guys have been saying, it's looking like Dostal's coming across. I'm pretty sure of that. Having listened to some previous Gulls podcasts via their play-by-play guy, I think even before it was revealed that Boyle was signed elsewhere, they made it sound like that was a done deal and Dostal's coming across. So, yeah, looks like it'll be Dostal and Harrison Ek. So fourth in the division, I'm putting the Roadrunners, which is Arizona's team. They've still got some good talent there, and they've got some surprising talent coming through. So they've got Tyler Steenbergen, Hudson Fashing, Michael Bunting, Blake Spears, and Lane Peterson. Those are all some pretty good players they had last year, and they're back again for another year. And coming through, making their debut this season, Mateus Machelli. He had 12 points in 12 games with Ilves, the same team that Dostal's playing on. That's so far this season, 12 points in 12 games. And Jan Jenik, 2018 third rounder, who had 56 points in 27 games in the OHL last year. And also Victor Soderstrom, who he's on loan to the Elverskan, so that looks like he's definitely coming over. And Aiden Hill and net with Ivan Prosvestov. So yeah, they'll be good again this year. They will give the Gulls a run for their money for that final playoff spot. So yeah, top four go through. On the outside, I'm picking the Heat, who have pretty much the same roster as last year, but a whole bunch of guys graduating and nobody good coming through. The only person of note coming through I can see is Mateus Emilio Pedersen, who had 35 points in 36 games with the University of Denver last year. But other than that, it's all the same, and they weren't that great last year. Next year will be interesting for them, though, because they've got Jacob Pelletier and Dustin Wolf. And then, yeah, San Jose, the Barracuda. They're going to have Jacob Middleton graduating to the Sharks, I'm picking, so that'll hurt them a lot because he ate a lot of minutes for them. But coming through, they've got Ryan Merkley. He had 76 points in 60 games with the Knights in the OHL, so it's 1-for-1 kind of thing, I guess, though Merkley's more offensive. So, but other than that, it's just another year of experience for the rest of their group, and other than Blakefield and Hobowatz, they don't really have a heck of a lot else. And the other teams is the Colorado team, the Eagles, and the Vegas team, the Silver Knights. So the Eagles, it's funny because we all know that they signed Sherwood, and that's really sad. But looking at their roster, I can kind of see why he went there now, because they don't have a lot of options. So he's going to get a lot of chances and a lot of ice time. Martin Kalt is their best option. He saw some NHL time last year, and yeah, next year they got Bowen Byram coming through though, so that'll be scary. But yeah, pretty much all of Colorado's talent is up with the big club. They don't have a heck of a lot in the minors. And yeah, Vegas, same kind of story. Cody Glass, I expect to go up to Vegas, as same as Zach Whitecloud. So that just leaves them with Lucas Elvenes and Thomas Yurko. Keegan Colasar was okay for them, but I don't know. It depends on how well he does. But other than that, they don't have much else. So, yeah, there you have it. I'm picking the Gulls to make the playoffs, yes. Whether they do any damage, I'm not as confident as I was about them last season. Just because, yeah, they could have had Jones, Terry, all of those guys. But now they're not eligible. So, yeah. Here's hoping that they do get Zegras, though, for a good portion of the year, because that will be super fun to watch. Anyway, good to talk. Feel free to send more questions my way. Cheers.
So that was Ask the Nest. So thank you so much to John Broadbent for doing that for us. We're hoping to do that a little bit more. If you have any questions, send them our way. Also, make sure to tag John Broadbent in those tweets. Also, he runs the @DefendTheNest account. Also, check out his website, defendthenest.com. Really great work by John over there. Make sure to go check it out. That was him that just did all of that. Obviously, he's from New Zealand, does a really good job keeping up with the goals. And so thanks a bunch, John. Miss you. I hope you're doing great. So we'll do that again. Throw us questions for the goals, and we'll give that to John. We'll do that some more. We'll try to do that each episode if we can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Huge thank you to John. And I'm sure he's doing great, because I don't know if you've seen New Zealand, but they're doing great.
Doing pretty good.
They're doing awesome.
We should just go. We should just go over there and do the podcast over there. Go to New Zealand. John has a nice little bed and breakfast over there that we can just stay at. Have a good time.
Yeah. We can go catch a rugby match. With full fans in the stands. I mean, we can really turn back the clock to 2019.
Seriously.
Essentially.
And John can make us all look bad playing roller hockey. John is very good at hockey.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty low bar with us too. But anyway,
that is a good point. So real quick, we got 2 more questions to get to before the Twitch chat. One we can hit pretty quick. It came from McQuinnan. It's one we're gonna get a fair amount as we go through this off season. But he asked us, do you guys think Trevor Zegras is an Anaheim Duck full time next season, regardless of role? And then also ask, can he even play in the AHL after signing his EL seat earlier this year? So I'll hit that second point. Yes, he is eligible for the AHL because he has never played in junior. He is eligible to play in the AHL right away. As for my opinion, I think he's going to be up and down. I think he will make his Ducks debut next season. However, I'm not sure how long that will be. He is eligible for an entry-level slide, so that does play a part in it also, which for those of you that don't know, that means basically if he plays over, I think it's 10 games or more, his contract will happen this year. If he plays 10 games or less in the NHL, then his entry-level deal will slide.
But we've also seen the Ducks not care about that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Isaac Lundestrom. Yeah, so I don't totally know how much we should factor that in.
Comtois, they didn't care either. Comtois, they burned a year.
Yeah, Comtois is the other one that I was thinking of. But the point with Zegras is, I think, is exactly what you're saying, is that he's probably gonna get good chunks of time with Anaheim, and he's probably gonna have some chunks in San Diego. That's kind of what they've done with all of their prospects. Now, Trevor Zegras may be just so good in the NHL that they don't do that with him, but I wouldn't be shocked if he spends some time in the AHL.
Yeah, I agree with that. So,
do we know what jersey number Trevor Zegras will wear? This is a completely random question, but
you're throwing me a curveball here, and I like it. I like it.
That's what I'm here for.
Let's see. So he wore the number 13 for Boston University, and it looks like he wore 21. I think his number. It looks like his number. He also wore 11.
11. Yeah.
He wore 11. He wore 13. It seems like he's kind of been all over the place in terms of his number, but I would expect 11 or 13 to be the number that he will probably
You're just
take.
Choosing those. Yeah. Well, both of those should be available to him, and the Ducks will love that because they love their players having lower numbers. I think he was 53 at the World Juniors. Could be wrong about that.
I don't think so. I think he wore. I think he wore. He wore. Maybe you might be right there. No, he wore 20. He wore 21. He wore 21.
He's 21. So if he chooses to be 21, he'll have to fight David Backes over it, because that is currently taken on the Ducks roster.
My bet is 11 or 13, but who knows? I mean, the Ducks are notorious for not giving a player their number until they actually make the roster, especially if it's a really low number.
Yeah.
My bet is he ends up, 53 honestly could be the number he goes for.
Are you forgetting about one Max Comtois?
Yep, definitely forgot. I mean, what if Comtois changes his number? You know?
Is this the year Comtois changes his number? Because he was 44 in junior, and Michael Del Zotto has been 44 on Anaheim, and I mean even Max Comtois' Instagram handle has 44 in it. So I'm guessing he wants 44 pretty bad.
You would think so.
This is my niche prediction of the season. Max Comtois switches to 44. Write it in stone. Write it in stone.
Just put it there for everyone to know.
So that could open the door for Trevor Zegras going with 53. Now, what is interesting, and now this is completely in the weeds, but quite frankly, I'm okay with that. Troy Terry.
Oh, wait. I already have a number for you.
That he switches to?
No, Trevor Zegras.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
His number's 52 on the current Ducks roster.
Aha! So
Investigative journalism right here. Investigative journalism.
They thought that they could sneak one past us. Shame on the Ducks for that.
That is, if you go to the Ducks, if you go to the Ducks website, go to team and go in the system. There is one Trevor Zegras wearing 52.
I love that. I love that you just did that.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we keep you around here.
Thanks. That's the reason.
It's the only reason.
So he'll probably wear 52 this upcoming year, and then eventually switch to like 11 or 13.
So I don't know if we're breaking news here. We probably aren't. But okay, yeah. I don't know when this happened. When did the Ducks sign Vinny Lettieri?
Well,
because he's
John Broadbent mentioned that in the Defend the Nest segment.
So that happened on the 9th of October.
Yeah, that happened, and John made sure to talk about that. Sorry, everyone. Felix could not hear that as that played.
Yeah.
So that's why that's a little bit off there. But yes, the Ducks signed Vinny Lettieri, or however you pronounce it.
Okay. Well, there you go. Also, another candidate for changing his number is Sam Steele, 34. I don't know if he wants a goalie number forever.
I could see a guy in the 30s staying in the 30s. So who knows? What was going to be your locked in bet on Troy? You were mentioning Troy Terry when I found the Trevor Zegras news.
My locked in bet is that Comtois swaps to 44.
Troy Terry probably goes away from 61.
Yeah, well, he's been 19 his whole career, and I think 19 makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, it's a lower number. And so, by the way, Sam Steele was 23 in junior. So maybe he sticks with 34 because he likes it. But with the way his last season went, maybe he's itching for a little change, and he goes back to 23 where he experienced so much success in junior. So
yeah,
honestly, this is the thing I'll be watching. I don't care about anything else. Just I want to see jersey numbers.
Jersey numbers is what I live for, honestly.
They matter.
What I live for.
They matter.
Yeah. Although Apparition brings up, if it's not out of the question that Troy Terry stays at 61. Ricard Raquel has stayed with his number in the 60s.
Correct. But I would argue that guys who don't get a ton of success right away, they prefer changing. Mm-hmm. If the opportunity presents itself. I could be completely wrong about that. But yeah, right now in the system, you don't see any other jersey. Well, now to be fair, right now the in the system page for the Ducks still has Kiefer Sherwood. So
True. It also has Henry Thrun.
What is going on here?
That is weird that Thrun is there. Do they have any other guys that were playing? Because I thought Trevor Zegras was there because he had just signed, so they maybe threw him in there.
I love how Jacob Larson is on here. Just as Kevin Boyle is still.
These are guys that aren't. Yeah, so that's old, but I mean that still tells you that the Ducks assigned Trevor Zegras the number 52.
So maybe this. I mean, who knows when this was written? This could have been written before the shutdown or shortly after the shutdown. Who knows when this was actually entered? But yeah, so 52 makes sense because 53 was a possibility. It's not available. We don't think he'd get a lower number. So I love how Axel Anderson has not been assigned a number.
So
love to see it.
Sean Seabolt asks us, what's the best number on the Ducks? What is your number? I guess it's personal preference.
So my favorite number on the Ducks?
Yeah, or just number in general for someone to use.
Well, see now you're asking. These are not simple questions.
No, they are not.
It depends on your position.
These are the
It
hard
depends
hitting
on the
questions
player.
that we get paid to answer, Felix. These are the hard hitting questions.
Honestly, these are the toughest ones because I would say that if you're a flashy, skilled forward, right?
You have
I think
you have so many of these rules.
a higher number can look good on you. 67 looks good on Rickard Rakell. If you're a more of a stay-at-home D-man, right? If you're a guy who loves to chip the puck off the glass and you don't really bring a whole lot defensively, I think a low number can suit you just great. If you are
We have exact
defensive
opposite
center,
ideas of
sometimes,
this.
huh?
We have the exact opposite ideas of this. For me, high
Well,
numbers are nobodies.
No, that's so wrong. 88. Ever heard of guys who have worn 88?
It still feels.
Ever heard of a guy who's worn 99? Ever heard of guys who wore 91?
Nah, not,
I mean-
99's a bogus number. No one wore it that was good, right?
Oh yeah, not at all. Ever heard of 66? Ever heard of that one? We're wrong about that. I'm sorry. Like, you
ever
just-
heard of a guy wearing number 9?
Yeah, but that's in the 40s and 50s. That's 60s. That's completely different. There have been and that's totally valid. Number
A
9 is my
guy
favorite.
wearing number 8?
Yes, like I'm not saying that there aren't forwards who wear low numbers and are very good. There are plenty of them, Hall of Famers in fact, but I do think that a high number can look great on a skilled, flashy forward. That's and especially the ones who have problems defensively. That's the full package right there. I'm basically describing myself as a beer league player.
Yeah. What number do you wear again? I forgot. It's been so long.
That's the funny thing is I wear 9.
Yeah, exactly. You and I both
just
are in
going-
the single digits.
Well, you were 2,
I wear 2.
which is dumb. I mean, I'm sorry. Like I'm
Thanks.
sure you have good. I'm sure you
Wow.
have good reasons.
It's
for
just
it,
my
but-
number.
Yeah, but you're a forward.
So?
Forwards don't wear 2.
Number 2 did not come from me playing hockey. That actually way back came from me playing Little League baseball and water
Yeah,
polo.
guess what? You're not
So?
playing either of those anymore.
That's my number.
I mean, fair enough. I'm just saying, I don't think there are any forwards in the NHL currently who wear 2.
Probably
I
not.
would even venture to say that there are no forwards in both the NHL and the AHL who wear 2 right now.
God, now you're making me look up actual information here.
If someone wants to look this up, please, by all means, let me know. But I will die on this hill.
It's been my life goal since really starting to pay attention to the Ducks is to be able to get a Ducks jersey with the number 2 on it with a player that's actually decent. There was
Wow.
a
So you're saying Brendan Goalie isn't decent?
I do not want a Brendan Goalie jersey.
Brendan Goalie wears number 2, and if you look at his underlying metrics, he's decent or has been decent. He wasn't decent last year.
I do not want a Brendan Goalie jersey. But I mean, for the longest time, there was not a Duck that had worn number 2. I believe there was Ken Klee.
What about so you're saying you wouldn't wear a Kevin Bieksa number 2 jersey?
No. Ken Klee wore number 2 for a couple games for the Ducks. And then there was a good couple of years without a number 2. And then Eric Brewer came in and I think wore number 2.
I think he was 3. Or
No,
I could be totally wrong
I
with
think
that,
Eric
but-
Brewer on the Ducks wore number 2. Now I got to make sure about this.
Yeah, but here's the common thread of guys we've talked about.
They're all bad.
No, well, sure, but they're all defensemen.
Well, yeah, that too.
None of them are forwards.
Yeah.
So you're wrong.
Just give me a good player wearing number 2 so I can get the jersey, damn it.
Can I answer the initial question of who has the best number on the Ducks?
Sure. Sorry.
Um,
Sidetracked.
You will completely. There's a lot of bad numbers on the Ducks. I think that you can't go wrong with Cam Fowler wearing number 4, right? I think he wears it for Bobby Orr. Could be completely wrong about that, but 4 is a good look on him, right? Smooth skating defenseman. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. So good on him for sticking with tradition. Outside of that, 15 for Ryan Getzlaf, it's iconic. So I let him have that. Here's a number that I like, and this is very random. 26 on Andreas Gazzino. It's a good look. Because 26, I think Marty St. Louis. I think skilled, smaller forward. And Andreas Gazzino might not be the most skilled, not to Marty St. Louis level, but he's listed at 5'10". So maybe he wears 26 for a reason. Who knows? For Marty St. Louis.
That was out of left field.
It's a good number. 26
Yeah.
is a good number.
For me, favorite number on the Ducks, probably Saku Koivu with 11. Just looked right.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the current roster.
Oh, I don't know.
What the heck?
It just said best. The question was just best number on the Ducks.
The best all time. I mean, it's probably
Solani
I would
8.
say-
Solani 8.
Solani 8 or Korea 9. I mean, the two that have been retired. Or I always really liked Jaguar 35 for whatever reason. I always just like that. I liked Frederick Anderson 31.
Gibson at 36 always I've found looks good because of Jaguar having 35.
I've never liked 36 on it. It just looks weird. It doesn't look right. 36 isn't a classic goalie number, but I do like it for Gibson because he's not really a stereotypical goalie, right? In the way he plays, he's super athletic, not always orthodox, and so it makes sense for him. It's grown on me for him.
Yeah.
You know, a number that I've always hated, and this is gonna be my last one before we move on. The number I hated the most that just didn't make any sense.
5?
No, Matt Bolesky 39. That's a goalie number.
Oh, that was a number that was given to him. 100%.
Well, like Jakob Silfverberg's 33, goalie number, but for whatever reason, it works for him.
Fair enough. I don't know. I don't have a big say on it.
Now, going off of a question we got, though, regarding Silfverberg, does Silfverberg still work for the Ducks?
So, yes. So, good listener of the show, Hey Yo D-Flow, good friend of the pod, who's in our Discord, sent me a message saying, here's a question for you for the show on Sunday. Is Jakob Silfverberg worth his contract? And this stems from the RAPM charts that I threw in our Discord chat of his last 3 seasons and how he's barely like a half a standard deviation above average in many of the metrics shown. And basically, he's like, I almost feel bad because he's one of his favorite Ducks, but it's an interesting point of discussion when you compare his metrics to Raquel and notice how much worse they are. So I'll get up on the screen, actually, while you kind of start going on this topic, the comparison between Ricard Raquel and Jakob Silfverberg that Heyo D-Flow is talking about. So what are your thoughts on this to start? And And also, just to be clear, I just want to lay out what his current contract is and how much it is, because that is a big part of this conversation. And so I believe he has 4 years left on his deal. He has, let's see. So this upcoming season, he has 4 years left on his deal at 5.25 in each of those years for the cap hit.
I think he's still good. I don't really have any big issues with Silfverberg. I think that there are elements of his game that are maybe taking a bit of a downtick. He's not necessarily as good offensively as he used to be. He's not as much of a shutdown guy defensively, but he's still a good player. He still can do things. And I think even last year we saw, a bit of an uptick in his offensive game. And he doesn't really bring a whole lot on special teams, which is a bit of a bummer because he's so good at 5-on-5 and he has been for a long time that you would think that maybe he could, bring some of that, especially on the penalty kill, because he is so good defensively at 5-on-5. But that just doesn't seem to translate for whatever reason. But I think overall, he's still a very good player. He's kind of just the quintessential second liner where almost exactly what you're going to get, right? He's capped out offensively. He's probably not going to hit 30 goals, but he's going to give you consistent play driving. He's going to keep the puck out of his own end. He's a very good, reliable player, and that's the kind of player that coaches love. And unfortunately, he's a bit he's on an island on this Ducks roster because there really isn't another player like him on the Ducks.
Yeah, exactly. And so now up on the screen real quick, you've got the multi-season between Raquel and Silfverberg, and you can see the difference there. Silfverberg is much better defensively than Raquel, who's negative defensively, but offensively just does not drive play, does not score goals in the same way that Raquel does. Even if the goals are there, the actual chances, a lot of things going towards it over the last 3 seasons haven't been there. Now this past year, if you look at it, they're a little bit closer in terms of actual goal scoring in goals for per 60. But in terms of actual chance generation, Raquel is a fair amount better, but the same thing occurs where Silfverberg's better defensively. And so my biggest issue with Silfverberg isn't necessarily, I think he's probably getting paid the right amount. honestly.
Yeah, I think he's right. He's right on value.
I think he's on value. I guess my concern is the term, in the fact that there are still 4 years remaining. He's a guy that is currently 30 years old, just turned 30, so he's going to be starting going into the downturn of his year. I think if this was a 3-year deal, so we were entering year 2 of 3, I'd feel a lot better about this. But I'm concerned about the final 2 years of this contract when he's 32 and 33. I think that that's where a concern comes in, because I think defensively he's always going to be fine. But if he drops off and is in the 10 goals scored and that's about what he's generating also, I think then that's kind of an issue, because if he's only getting 10 goals, then he's not necessarily a second liner for you anymore. He's more so in that third line role, and that's kind of what the Ducks have a lot of. And so that's my concern. I think this upcoming season and next season, or the season after, I think it will be fine. I think he'll probably still be in the 20-plus goal range, but it's those final 2 years. And that's always been my concern with this contract, is the fourth and the fifth year.
Let me ask you this. Who's the Ducks' best forward right now?
Probably Rickard Rakell, in my opinion.
Okay, but do you think he's any lower than, let's say, 3, Jakob Silfverberg?
No, I think he's second.
Yeah, I think he has to be. I think he has to be top 2.
So,
and I might even argue top 1.
One thing I want to touch on real quick is Apparition asked us about players falling off with us mentioning this. He asked, do players fall off at 32? I always thought that was around 34 or so, because of besides fully physical players like Perry. So no. So actually players start falling off around 29. Is when you see scoring production start to fall off. And it can potentially start falling off a cliff completely depending on the player at 32-ish is in my head kind of what I have. But the production starts to tail off. You're exiting your prime around 29 years old in terms of your scoring prime is what we've seen historically.
Yeah, 29 to 30. Maybe some guys 31. But
yeah, and Apparition, hold on. I'll find an article and I'll link it in the Twitch chat for you so you can see that aging curve documentation kind of that we're talking about. And Sean Siebel asked, what's his injury record? Not so bad, right? Silfverberg actually was injured a decent amount, I think, early on in his Ducks tenure, but since then he's been pretty good in terms of injuries. He's been pretty healthy, has played a fair amount of hockey for the Ducks. I'm looking at his games played. He's consistently in the 70-plus game range for the Ducks outside of, it looks like basically 13-14 was the only season that he played underneath 70 games in a full season. And that was, I believe he broke his wrist. That was his first season with the Ducks, and he hurt his wrist during that season. So
the thing with Silfverberg is that there's nothing, I guess, sexy about his game, right? But he is just so reliable, and he can be so effective in multiple facets of the game. Whereas Rakell, I think he is very good offensively, and he's good at getting his own shot, and his shot is very potent, but he doesn't bring a ton else outside of that, and that's fine. You can't have guys who do it all the time, right? You need specialists, and I think that's what Rickard Rakell is at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone in the Twitch chat, by the way, has any questions, start throwing them in. I mean, let me ask you this. How do you feel about Silfverberg, though, in the contract overall?
So I think, again, I think right now the way he plays, I think he's probably worth his contract. Maybe it's a little of an overpay because the offensive production isn't really there, and I think the way contracts tend to be decided is by offensive output. But if you dig deeper into what he does overall, I think that he's definitely worth it. And so right now it's fine. It makes sense for what the Ducks are trying to do, get back into the playoff hunt. And on the back end, it could take a slide. But even then, I think for example, a Rickard Rakell, I think this is a good comparison to make. Rickard Rakell is, in the last 3 years, has been a very good finisher. He's a good shooter. He's a guy who drives offense and has also been good on the power play. But once he ages, for example, we don't know how he's going to be able to get that kind of offense, maybe once his athleticism wanes a bit. Whereas Silfverberg, I think he's going to at least still be able to bring you something, for example, defensively, as he ages. And I'm not saying that I'd rather have Silfverberg than Rakell. They just do different things. But I think there's a world where Silfverberg does age rather gracefully.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. And so I found that article and I threw it in our Twitch chat, but there's one quote in there that comes from Rob Volman from StatShot, which is a very good book. Highly suggest everyone, if you are interested in analytics, go check it out. It's a good primer. It is a little bit dated. It was pre-expected goals really being a thing, but it's still a great tool to be able to read to kind of understand and break down some things. And actually, Rob Volman now is actually employed by the LA Kings, and so that kind of shows you the quality of work that he did, that he was then hired by the LA Kings, and he put out a lot of great work that I believe is also available online for you to go check out. But he had this quote from StatShot: most players hit their peak by the age of 24 or 25, then decline gradually until age 30, at which point their performance can begin to tumble more noticeably, with the risk of absolute collapse by age 34 or 35.
Yeah, which, I mean, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, before that came out, before that kind of became more thought of, people thought that your
30 was prime.
extended. Yeah, exactly. That 30 is when you hit your prime, or that those late 20s. But realistically, it's sooner than that.
Yeah. So here we go. We got a couple questions. Sean Seable asked, in your opinion, what does each kid need to change/fix to take the next step or reach their ceiling? So there's a whole lot there, but let's just key in on.
Oh boy.
Real quick, I guess. Let's try to hit this quick. What do you think Troy Terry needs to do to help him take the next step?
I think Troy Terry is the player who needs to do the least to take the next step. I just think he needs to shoot more.
Okay.
I mean, that's really it, because he does everything else well.
Well, let's hit this rapid fire. Sam Steele.
I mean, I don't even know where to start.
Okay.
He needs to be better in all facets of the game.
Okay. Max Comtois.
Back check.
Max Jones.
I don't know. I think he kind of is what he's going to be.
Yeah.
Max Jones. So I don't know if there's a whole lot there. I mean, I think if the more he can add in terms of skill, he can maybe increase his offensive ceiling.
Yep. Josh Mahura.
Get a well-rounded game. He already does good things offensively, but to earn that trust, he's going to have to really bring it defensively.
And now the most fun one for me, Brendan Goalie.
Really very similar to Josh Mahura, but to a greater degree. He needs to get much better defensively.
Yep. All right. Let's end with this question. We got this one from Apparition. Said, kind of curious what you guys think the Ducks will do with their goalie situation after the season, with Anthony Stolar supposedly being the next great goalie. I believe he might. I think he may be talking about Lucas Dostal there, not Stolar's.
Yeah.
Let me know, Operation, if that's what you meant, but I believe you meant Lucas Dostal. Do you think after this season they make him the starter and trade Gibson, or have them as a tandem for a year or two? So let me start on this one. So I think that Dostal is probably going to spend the entire season in the AHL, and I think that is something that could be extremely beneficial for the goals for Dostal with everything that he's showing, because Dostal is absolutely killing it over in Finland right now.
Yep.
And so I don't know if you necessarily want to trade Gibson and anoint Dostal right away. I think maybe you're more open to the idea of trading John Gibson, but it's not simply because of Dostal. If you can get a good return for Gibson that helps you out significantly, having Dostal makes that a little bit easier to do, easier to swallow. I don't know if Dostal's ready to be a starter next season, though. He's a guy that's still going to need a couple years to get seasoned in North America. There is a transition coming from Europe, especially Finland isn't actually European ice. I believe it's a mix between North American size and European size ice. It's like halfway between the two of them. So the angles do change. So he's going to have to be able to play over here for a little bit to get used to the angles. And honestly, goaltending is one of the positions that really has to make some adjustments, because your angles are completely different. If a guy's along the boards, it's a completely different play than in North America than anywhere else. So, by the way, currently he has a .947 save percentage over in Finland. So he's very good.
In a good league.
Yes. So I think he's going to be the AHL starter for the next year or two, and then maybe bring him up and start making it more of a tandem situation with Gibson. And as Gibson starts to hit his late 20s, early 30s, it becomes a tandem. And maybe you do look at trading Gibson. Maybe you do what a team like Tampa Bay did, where they moved Ben Bishop and gave the reins.
Look at the Canadians. I mean, in this scenario, Lucas Dostal is Carey Price, and Yaroslav Halak was the older prospect. But I am a bit more on the side of just why not just have a really good tandem indefinitely, right? Unless, yeah, you can trade Gibson for value and then move off of that contract. But I would love to see that tandem. I think that'd be excellent.
Yes. Let me ask you this. This is one from Lewis. I don't know the answer to it, so I'm curious if you know. I'm trying to Google it really quickly as we go. Why do other leagues in the world have different ice rink sizes? As in, why is there a North American size versus an Olympic size?
So, well, in North America, North America didn't have a standard ice size up until, I don't know, the 90s, maybe even late 90s or late 80s. But back in the 70s, 60s, going back, different teams in the NHL had different rink sizes. Part of the reason that it was so difficult to play the Flyers when they first came up was playing in that barn, the Broad Street Bullies. They had a smaller rink, and so you had no room out there, and with their physical style made it really tough. So the standardized size in North America is very recent, and I'm just guessing that those two things evolved at a different pace, and then the IIHF chose to go with that size that they use in Europe, or I guess Europe just chooses to use the IIHF size. I'm not really totally sure there.
Yeah, I mean, and I
But
think
that's a really good question.
maybe it's a situation of different play styles also, and the bigger size.
I like both. I think that both have their merits.
Yes,
I'm not. There's people who say that the NHL, to fix their problem of getting more offense, should just go to bigger ice, and I don't know if that would necessarily lead to a better product. I think that there's a lot of fun in a smaller rink, and these just crazy rushes that can happen, these battles. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm honestly, I'd like to watch more Finnish hockey to see how it is over there, with the fact that they're hybrid. They're not as wide as Olympic ice. They're not as narrow as North American, as an NHL rink. So I'm curious. As a beer league player, I prefer the NHL ice because it means I don't have to skate as much.
Yeah, well, I love the international ice because you can make these crazy stretch passes and cross ice passes, which for me probably turn into turnovers. But you know,
yeah, I don't like getting the puck along the boards and feeling like I'm so far away from the net, personally. But
just let it rip.
Yeah, you're so far out that it's gonna turn into a turnover.
I have to tell Jake to shoot so many times when we play.
Do you really? I feel like I shoot the puck enough.
You could always shoot more. You can always shoot more.
I'll remember this. I'll remember this next time when I'm shooting a bunch and getting yelled at it.
60 up.
Fair enough. Well, I think that's gonna do it for tonight. We've turned this into basically an hour 45, Felix.
Well, that's what we're here to do. Fill up airtime. Well, in all seriousness, thanks everybody for listening. Like I mentioned off the top, it's been a crazy year. It is mercifully winding down, hopefully to bigger and better things. So we really do appreciate everybody sticking with us. We are going to get back to hockey at some point, January, February, whenever that will be. And I'm sure that the Ducks will have things to announce. We'll get probably the jersey announcement at some point. So there's some good stuff on the way. And we'll find ways to keep it interesting with guests, different things like that. So stay with us. And if you do enjoy what you've been hearing, there's a number of different ways that you can support this show. So the one that we really do appreciate and that does benefit you is our Patreon page, which we talked about earlier in the show. So there are two tiers, where you can be a patron. So for $1 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord chat. This has been a lot of fun, especially when we have a lot of news coming down the pipe. So things like Free Agent Frenzy, the draft, right? We get reactions in there. We get all kinds of really awesome conversations going, and especially, I think in Southern California, if you are a diehard hockey fan and you're really into the nitty gritty of the game, or you're trying to learn, looking at it maybe from more the way we do, more of an analytical side, and it's not just numbers, but eye test, tactics, different things like that. This Discord chat really does give you a good community to kind of delve into that and find out more. So that's for $1 a month. It's $1. Now, if you want to up the ante here and go to $5 a month, you still get access to the Discord chat, but you also get 2 bonus episodes a month. So if you enjoy what we do here, you get that even more on the bonus episodes. And on those, we can really go and dive deep into topics. So, for example, the one that we did recently, we just took a look at the Ducks roster for next year, kind of player by player, projecting it out, looking at whether or not this is the way to go for the Ducks to be trying to make the playoffs. Some kind of bigger picture questions. Of course, part of I think the benefit of that show is that because it is just for a select audience, we are a bit more unfiltered, so there's a lot more banter. So if you enjoy kind of more of the comedic aspect of the show, if there is any, well, you definitely get that with the bonus episode. So that's for $5 a month, and that's at patreon.com/crashthepond. Now, another way that you can support us that's completely free, just search Crash the Pond on the Apple Podcast app, and you can do one of two things, or both, I guess. You can just pull up the name, pull up the show, just leave a 5-star rating. That is always appreciated. It goes a long way. But you can also leave a rating and leave a review. These listener reviews, first off, we love reading them. It's great to hear from you guys. But also, they really do help us climb those rankings and help us keep the lights on over here. So that is really appreciated. That's at the Apple Podcast app. We're on all of your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/crashthepond. Jake posts the Twitch stream on there, and we have a good little community going there in the comments. Jake will respond to your comment. Keep that in mind. So if you're on YouTube, if that's how you like to consume your podcasts, make sure you're subscribing there and turning your notifications on so you know when those episodes are going up. Although, spoiler alert, typically it's going to be Monday morning,
6 a.m. ish, right around there.
Yep, and as we talked about in the middle of the show-ish, I don't even remember when that was anymore, but if you are looking to up your grooming game, use that code CTP at checkout at manscaped.com, and you get 20% off of your order, and you help out your favorite podcasts. So
yep.
I'd say it's a win-win.
Definitely. That everything?
I think that's it. We talked about the Twitch stream, right?
Yep, so the only thing that I really want to add is everyone make sure to go out and vote.
Yep. So on that note, everybody, thanks so much for listening. Hope you guys have a great week, and we will talk to you at the next show.
Bye.